Hello and welcome to another episode of Ed Transformed. Ed Transformed is brought to you by School of the Future International Academy, in short, SOFIA. SOFIA is a non-profit, non-governmental organization that supports educational institutions, school leaders and educators in their effort to improve their knowledge, skills and school operations. This way we aspire to contribute to the creation of equal opportunities for every student out there. This is a series of podcasts where we start discussions on topics that matter most to the modern educational community. We share personal stories of educators, education professionals, and educational projects that we feel are important. By exchanging approaches and ideas, we try to enrich the educational landscape and better the services we provide to our students. Today, we are honored to welcome Cat Davison. Cat is the CEO and founder of EduSpots, a pioneering organization that connects, trains, and equips individuals to drive community-led changes in education, focusing mostly on the sub-Saharan African countries. But she will tell us more about it. Cat, hello.
Hi, thank you so much for welcoming me here today.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Cat, when you introduce yourself to students or educators, how do you describe what you do and why?
So I always find this quite a difficult question because I think my work draws together so many different aspects of education and educational leadership, education creativity, educational community building. So I would say that I often introduce myself as a teacher because I think everything that I do and EduSpots does is very much grounded in understanding of what it's really like to be in a classroom, being a teacher or being a community educator. And I think it's really important that people who are given titles such as CEOs are able to draw that experience in, whether direct or indirect, into the way that they work. So I would often describe myself as a teacher, a community educator, a social entrepreneur, and ultimately someone who's really interested in the power of networks and how building community with and in between people can lead to incredible outcomes for everyone, and particularly with a focus on peer-to-peer learning models that kind of draw people together in collaborative learning rather than sort of having a hierarchical system where one person is the expert and one person is sort of the recipient of knowledge. So I hope that gives a sense to how I might introduce myself. Obviously with students I might say it a bit more simply.
A teacher then, that's a title that encompasses all of your work and principles, I understand.
Yeah, it's interesting though, isn't it, that even the word teacher can give a sense that you are passing on knowledge that's quite quite hierarchical, or that might not give enough agency to the students in the process. So I'm also interested in how teaching can become more facilitative in the way that it's framed. But teacher is a language that we work with.
Mm-hmm. Let's focus a little bit on EduSpots. Speak to us about EduSpots. How was the organization created? What is the mission? What is the purpose behind it? And what do you aspire it to become in the future?
Great. So this is also quite a complex question to answer sometimes. As EduSpots, I always say it doesn't have a story that's defined or told purely by me. In EduSpots, we have a very strong belief that everyone has a right to shape their own story and their own narrative about how change happens when they're within a system. And I think before I share my perspective coming into EduSpots, it's important to say that every spot is set up by a local team and that they have their own story for why they decided to set up an education spot in their community. And they have their own remarkable stories of change that you can find on the EduSpots website. And the EduSpots has also multiple leaders, whether it's our Catalyst Committee, Chair Adu, who was once a learner or a spark, as we call them, or our Chair of Trustees. So we have multiple kind of ideas of stories. But to get to your question, so I'm someone who has a really deep long-term interest in citizenship education. So I was a teacher for 12 years, and in different ways and forms, I think everything that I did was around trying to come up with ways that students are able to have the kind of tools and skills that they need to create meaningful changes in the world. So I think growing up as a young person myself, I often felt, I think, quite distressed by what was happening in the world. I felt a very strong sense of injustice around things that were happening, and I felt a real sense that I didn't quite know how to act. And then when I tried to make small changes, I didn't feel always I was given the support that I needed, whether it was by my peers or by my teachers or by my family, to make the changes that maybe I would have been able to make and have a team behind as a young person. So lots of although I've been a teacher of various formal subjects ranging from religious studies, critical thinking, sport, PSHE, I've done a lot of different areas, which I think have combined to give an interesting foundation of kind of cross-subject disciplines. Basically have a deep interest in how you can create a system or strengthen the curriculum approach or the school approach to enable students to have, and teachers actually, to have more agency in terms of how they are able to change things in the world and relate with the world around them, as it's not all about leading one-off projects, but about all of their everyday actions in society and how informed they are in making decisions that positively impact others. So along my journey, as I was trying to build my greater understanding of the world and the global context of education, I was really fortunate to be given an opportunity to go to Ghana for a school partnership. I think this was about 14 years ago. And I think my worldview certainly shifted when I began to gain an understanding of Ghanaian culture, the Ghanaian education system, which has been hugely influential in terms of how I see education, and even my understanding of community and what citizenship education looks like. I think has been hugely influenced by Ghanaian educators, Ghanaian community members, where you can often find a much stronger and clearer sense of what community means in different ways. So without telling the full story, I was involved with a community library project that was often shut, and that my students from the UK at this point were also visiting and had a certain role with. And upon all of us and local students and teachers looking at the kind of situation, it seemed very clear that the local people should be leading, that the local people should, including the students, should be making decisions, that they should be the ones who had access to the space, determine the resources, the activities, and similar. So a group of us decided to support a project in the next community, in a community called Aberfour. And the team in Aberfour of teachers and the Adai family came up with this idea of a spot. So a spot is a drinking space in Ghana. For anyone who's visited, there are spots all over the country that have remarkable diverse names as well. So you see, Tina's spot, or my best friend's spot, or top of the world spot, or God bless you spot. And I think looking at all these diverse spots, drinking places where people come together, the original founding idea of an EduSpot was people coming together around an education space that was free and open for use by anyone in the community and always run and led by people from that community. So many of the spots are in schools, mostly government schools, with strong local partnership with local education institutions. And some of the spots are in community libraries or are built through partnership with local NGOs. And we're excited to share, we just have launched a partnership with the Ghana Library Authority, who run the national library system. And we're looking at the potential integration of EduSpot's model. So basically, EduSpot's, in summary, is based around local teams coming together to set up spaces named spots that promote what we would call future ready education, but is all based on education that the communities want to create for their community's future, rather than this being something determined from outside. And across the years, as the Spot network grew, it was very clear that the network element to it brought huge value. So today we have over 400 change makers called catalysts, local educators, mostly teachers, but also some nurses, some businessmen, some students who lead educational activities of various diverse kinds, like the spots, completely diverse in nature, for about 10,000 learners each year, also providing kind of resources, mentorship, and we have quite a structured co-curricular clubs program. So yeah, that's the story of EduSpots, as ever evolving and very much about participation with the community-based catalysts really having a very strong role in all organizational decision making through a very heavily kind of participatory model of organizational progress.
This is unbelievably interesting to me. The first question that comes to my mind is, what are some best practices for involving and including all these people in these community efforts? Because I'm very sure, as you said in the beginning, a lot of people have the urge and the interest and the enthusiasm to start initiatives like that, but they don't know how to pass this enthusiasm to people around them. What are some best practices in including the communities and explaining what they can create together?
So it's really important to say, and I think this is the key in EduSpots, that all change is initiated by the community in EduSpots. So even the community teams apply to join the EduSpots network. So there's never really a point at which the EduSpots staff team, who as well, it's really key to say that 50% of the EduSpots staff team are not just Ghanaian, but have actually come from the Spot communities with really long-term pathways from being a catalyst or even a spark into staff roles. So I think the key thing is them having ownership of their project from the start. And I know there are lots of different ways of working with schools and creating positive change. So I guess I'm speaking to one example, which is a very community-led approach. But what we found really works is when it's made very clear from the start that they entirely own the project. And for us, that means financial ownership, as well as operational ownership, of risk ownership, of safeguarding ownership, of all of these things. Create a sense that it's on them to make sure that, you know, whatever objectives they've defined for themselves are achieved. And it's on them to make sure, with the support of a Spot community committee that is always set up, that comprises representatives from traditional leaders, parent-teacher associations, local head teachers, students, sort of wide, or any key organizational community leaders that the community feel are important to conclude, as well as thinking about various other aspects around inclusion of gender and similar. So I think, the key thing is that they, as community-based catalysts, are always the one in the driving seat. And the way that EduSpot staff, with all of our full-time staff are Ghanaian, the way that they position themselves with those community-based catalysts is more as a kind of ally and a coach. So obviously at times there might be points at which the community-based catalyst asks for some technical input, where maybe, you know, we might have an early years specialist who can support that. But the whole way that they relate is one of asking the community first, what is it they're trying to achieve, or what is their idea, or what are their challenges in the process, and helping them uncover through more kind of coaching language and methodologies what the next steps are for them. And obviously EduSpots tries to support in different ways. So another example of EduSpots practice is that we run a clubs curriculum. And how we do this is that leaves again room for that community ownership, which is going to be the theme of this conversation, is that every month we send a monthly challenge. So just for some context, we have early years education clubs called EduKids. We have upper primary clubs called DigiLit that focus on digital and literacy skills. We have eco-STEM clubs that are environmental and STEM education for junior high school students. And then there's gender equity called Ignite Equity, that's for that slightly older age group in upper junior high school. And it's important to say that all of those strands as well, they were chosen by the network, that they determined as a whole what key themes they wanted to create. And then there was a working group that came together to design the program with many of those strand leaders, again, coming from the Catalyst network. Basically every month we send a project-based learning activity called a challenge that's launched across the network. And I think I really love project-based learning. It's something I remember at school that always enabled that sense of self-directed learning, teamwork, and open-ended outcomes that I think just achieves astonishing results in terms of kind of creativity and allowing them to connect with their communities and similar. That gets kids excited and you know, is interactive, it's fun, and that there can be a strong sense of student leadership and voice. But we're also obviously aware of the challenges of integrating this within an existing school curriculum in schools that are busy, teachers that are busy and similar. So what we found really helpful is having a kind of 1 month time frame for the challenge with a range of tasks, you know, that have differentiated levels of participation that enable them to decide how often they meet the club for, when they meet, and even how they design the club and how it works to a large degree. And then there's a lot of ideas sharing that goes on across the network. There is a competition system and friendly leadership board and similar. But I think, the key learning in all of this is giving space for them to take ownership of their own learning process, not just giving space, that they already have the space, and we're just ensuring that that's protected through any way that a system is designed.
Perfect. We understand from the type of clubs you have that these were the objectives that the communities have set for their learning, like for these different age groups that, as you described. And what was the reaction of the students? How did the students feel being involved in this type of initiatives?
So I think it's, I've spoken to lots of students myself over the years, and I'm always wary of describing things secondhand. So from what I directly see and what I saw, so I recently went to a Bhutia in the Volta region, which was a new spot that had come into the EduSpots network maybe 6 months previous. And to give some context, there's a level of kind of pedagogical training that's very much focused on inclusion, on interactive learning, on big focus on keeping spots safe, ensuring that students can speak and have that sense of agency and participation. And it was amazing to see that just after a short period of having some training and being involved in the clubs program, and we also have a very high WhatsApp approach in that we do all this learning on WhatsApp, which I might go into in more detail if there's time, that I saw students that were really engaged, were really enjoying the learning, were coming up with their own ideas. They have their own chants. And again, what I love about EduSpots is the localization of the EduSpots concept, that every spot applies it in their own way. They have their own motto for their clubs. They have their own adapted logo with their own aims, their own. They have their own emblem of safeguarding that is an animal they put on the wall with their own kind of tagline for it. But I think we find that the learners, who we call Sparks, are just very engaged. They're fun. They find it fun, but crucially, they also have the catalysts. The change makers we call catalysts, the learners we call Sparks, that they really look up to them as role models, and this can lead to them becoming the future catalysts. So there's a multiplier effect built into the model where many learners now are becoming the catalysts. So this all comes back to what we were saying at the start about citizenship education, in case we were wondering, the link that sort of through having people from their local community engage them in these clubs in this participatory way, then the learners themselves see, when I grow up, I'm going to bring people together in my community to make a change in a way that relates to the community as well.
Brilliant. I was wondering, EduSpots seem to be very independent in the way they decide on the focus they want for their project and the focus they want for their learning outcomes and activities they will undertake to achieve them. Do they communicate the EduSpots? I mean, as a community, do you facilitate this communication, and is it important for the project? Nation-wise, I mean.
So at the point of which they choose their particular clubs that they enroll in, they meet with a strand coordinator who discusses with them their own intended objectives for joining the program, what they're looking for to get at in terms of outcomes. We also have, I guess, some program-wide outcomes that we're looking at that we track across the whole network. So we're doing multiple different bits of monitoring, evaluation and learning work that range from looking at student confidence or student self-esteem and measuring change over time, to doing things like ACE literacy tests, or there's an engagement in maths and science measure. We have our own program-wide monitoring and evaluation, and we feed back to the communities afterwards. And we also have a lot of focus group discussions and sort of more qualitative ways of I guess, having that constant sense of participation from the communities into the program design throughout. The aims are largely defined by the communities, but within this broader project scope that is in itself something that's largely defined by people who have been catalysts in similar communities across Ghana.
So, given the teachers' hectic schedules and challenges they face in their classrooms, do you feel that bits and pieces of these methodologies and strategies can be embedded in everyday operations in schools, in the central curricula? Or it's something that we should, only do as parallel projects to our main learning and teaching?
So it's interesting that we've seen how EduSports clubs, in a sense, they are separated from the school timetable. But in Ghana, they often have a period on the timetable that's dedicated for library time, despite not that many schools having a library. So there is actually some space that's for flexible use that's already within the school timetable that is quite common in schools across the world in different ways. And I think it's important, that we've seen in our evaluations, most recently, we've done a big independent evaluation of across 10 spots. And what came out is that the practices that teachers, the trained community-based catalysts that are part of the network, the practices that they were involving students in within the club setting were translating back into the classroom, so that there was always a level of curriculum connectedness. And that's partly in the program design, in that, for example, they might be looking at climate change in the curriculum, and then the EcoSTEM club might have a more project-based learning task around looking at how the weather is changing in the local community, or how farming is changing, or similar. So it's partly intentional that there are points of intersection, but we've also found something that really excites us to say that as a result of these clubs existing within the school, or the spot existing more widely, so most spots do have a sort of physical essence and some resources, digital tools and similar, but it's more, it's the clubs and the spots sort of inculcate a way of thinking that is in Ghana kind of called future ready education, that is much more participatory in its nature, that has been shown as having a ripple effect into schools, making lessons more interactive, more inclusive, more engaging for students, that is leading to higher school engagement, attendance and similar as a result. So I think, coming to the overall sort of scope of your question, it's so important that anything that is done within a school context that is slightly more informal, although ours is formal in some sense, has that integration with the school system. And I'm really personally particularly interested in how formal and informal education systems can come together, as this is also one of the primary aims of EduSports, to ensure, the structure already exists in the Ghanaian education system through the PTA and a lot of community connectedness between schools and communities. But certainly I felt in the UK that there could be a lot more done to connect school environments, which can feel like silos, to the community surrounding them, so that students really connect with the diverse cultures or the diverse activities, professions and similar around them. So that's all part of the design. And I really hope, by the way, just incidentally, that I think a lot of the ideas that are present and have been developed in EduSports in Ghana and Kenya currently are practices that would be very beneficial to schools in the UK, ensuring community connectedness and student agency and ownership. And we also do some online courses that are being relaunched that aim to give students intercultural understanding and those skills in sort of dialogue and kind of understanding how their own cultural perspective shapes their beliefs in different ways. So that's a sort of another separate aspect to our work that we're going to be developing in the future.
Brilliant. We would really love, and I really wish you that these efforts are successful and that they bring attention to this very important subject of schools having closed doors. In this podcast, we have said it a number of times that we believe schools are parts of a community and they should have open doors to invite the community and also send the students out at the community and to the community to share learning, teaching, best practices, and connect teaching to real world problem solving and skills that will help the community progress, together. Very often we see students being in schools, and even with the very diligent and successful students, to be schools because they want to get out of their community. And it's to me a little bit, bitter that, you're part of a community and your success and your skills cannot transfer to the people in your immediate environment. So I would love to see how you progress with this project. I find it extremely important.
Yeah, it's also interesting, to respond to what you're saying, that in some of the spots, when the students, so as they grow older in the spot, many of them become catalysts. And then some of them have the opportunity to go to university and leave, or senior high schools in Ghana. They're often transferred all over the country. But increasingly, they continue as catalysts online. And you see them meeting. There's one spot called Akumadan where they meet online every single week on Zoom. And those that are not in the community support with things like design work or creating educational resources or trying to do fundraising and similar. And so it's that sense of having that recurrent connection back to their community, even when they leave. that is really exciting about the model.
It is. It is. Formulating strong roots with a community can only benefit a person. So you don't have physically to be there, but offering back and caring about your community is developing this strong roots and this strong foundation for somebody. I can only find it beneficial for their future. Speaking about systems a little bit and more wider kind of perspective, if you were or when you are advising policymakers, which is one systemic change that you would push for right now in this education system that we are all operating?
Wow, it's difficult to pick one, and it depends which cultural context, which national context to relate to. And I guess I'm also very careful not to myself push for changes in the Ghanaian context, as it's not my country of origin, though I can speak to what maybe some of my colleagues would say. But is this for maybe general thoughts on education globally? Am I allowed to give more than one?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
So I think one thing I'm really interested in is the power of networks for supporting teacher motivation. So I recall myself often having ideas about things that could be done differently, or particularly in the kind of connection between education and community space. I think you find a lot of teachers who are budding social entrepreneurs, but without the support system to make their ideas a reality. So I would encourage people to think more about how networks can effectively support teacher motivation. As when you hear the word motivation in some contexts, it often has a financial association with it. Whereas what we found through our studies is that the catalysts in EduSpots really value having teacher friends all over the country with similar shared interests in specific specialist areas. And we've developed a particular way of managing networks on WhatsApp that are heavily sort of facilitated to enable dialogue with and between people in celebration and encouragement and all of this. I think enabling more spaces for peer-to-peer learning and encouragement is so vital. And I think that's what's been most transformative in my life, actually, as a teacher and as an NGO leader. Then maybe I'll just give two at a time. But the second one, I think, that is more about the classroom context. I think that there is so much work to do across the world in terms of better embedding critical thinking and kind of critical thinking, but with empathy. They kind of come together in a way that enables students to have a better ability to see that all the knowledge that they think they might have, or the ideas that they have, might have come from somewhere that might not be purely logical at times, might be cultural, might be the curriculum they're being delivered in different ways. And giving students those skills to challenge things in a positive and empathetic way, so that they're able to navigate the complexities of a world where they're reading things online and they don't necessarily know its truth or how that opinion has been shaped and formed. And I think this is the key skill in the digital age, especially with the use of AI as well, that ability to navigate and interrogate in a positive sense what they're coming across, but also integrating that with empathy, so that students also understand that when someone else comes with a different perspective, that there will be a route for why they came to that perspective, just as with themselves, so that they can then gain those skills and finding common ground. And I believe this is probably the greatest skill that is lacking to the extent that I think we'd all like to see. I don't think anyone disagrees with this that I've come across, no matter what nationality we are.
Yeah, I doubt that somebody would disagree with you with the two things you said, and with the fact that you set them as priorities, in my opinion. They are both important aspects of modern life that we need to equip our students with the right skills and awareness if we want to ensure a better future for the generations to come. EduSpots is a very inspiring project to me, and it brings me personally a lot of hope. What gives you hope when you look at the future of education and educational initiatives? Let's not put it in country context, but in general.
So I always take hope and inspiration from young people, in that I think young people today are really willing to listen to diverse views, and they're also, I think, much more able to take active steps in different ways than I was growing up. I think this is partly that they are They are more equipped with communication tools that have a wider reach. I think they're able to get more information independently, and all these things, I think, give them hopefully understanding and knowledge and tools and opportunities that I didn't have growing up. And I think a lot of them also have huge empathy to the stories that they see across the world, where people are deprived of rights and suffering and similar. So I think what gives me hope is the combination of the empathy and that desire to act I see in students, combined with, I think, digital tools when they're properly distributed. And I think there are huge questions and challenges ahead in terms of equitable access to digital tools and equity in terms of the representative nature of the content, and even just access to electricity and power to charge devices once they're there. But I think digital tools open up huge possibilities for students to come together as well, for teamwork to be further promoted, for information to be and opportunities to be more accessible. And I think also with AI, maybe finally, I think I'm still getting my head around AI and its consequences for education. But I think there's a lot of reflection, I think, at the moment on what is it that makes us human? What is it that maybe, when I'm writing a LinkedIn post or something, I'm like, what will make this unique? Someone reading it can feel the human element to it. And I hope that as AI develops with all its potentials for impact, that we further have that sense of humanity at the center of everything that we do as a key point of discussion.
Cat, I can't thank you enough for being here with us today and for sharing your journey and your insights. It was an amazing conversation. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, you've definitely made me reflect on a lot of different ideas today, and I think that's going back to when you asked to describe how I would describe myself. I think teaching is learning. And
yes.
Yeah, the more that we open ourselves to as many opportunities for learning and self-reflection as possible, and open ourselves to the possibilities of being wrong, then we can all move forward in different senses.
This is very true, and this is very true when we speak about communities that all engage in learning and teaching. When they teach, they learn, and when they learn, then they are able to teach. So it's a circle of inspiration for everybody, and I really think EduSpots are doing a very good, they have developed a very good model. That's why I wanted to bring that to the attention of the global education community, that at times we all have the intention and the interest of involving more people to the educational process and to our educational systems, but it takes a solid structure and a carefully crafted model to have an open but at the same time constructive participation and decision making to teaching and learning. So I really wanted to showcase EduSpots and show that taking the right direction and with the right tools, methodology and models, communities can come together to create something inspiring.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to reflect on what communities can do with just a system that really, I'm trying to get the right words here, so it's complex, but really enforces that sense of agency. So maybe to finish on a final example of Adu, who leads a Kumaran Community Library, or Kumaran EduSpots. And during the pandemic, he wanted learning to continue in his community, and I'm sharing this all with his permission. And what he decided to do with his team was to put a speaker system onto the outside of the library, and to broadcast lessons, and recruited local teachers to come and share and broadcast them for the whole community to hear. And I think it's such a great example that, in the UK, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't be allowed to create that much public noise. But in Ghana, they have information centres doing exactly this, and having this lessons blaring out for all the young kids who are at home, I know made a real difference, and made them see that education could still be at the forefront at such a challenging time. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of examples like this. And just want to again emphasise that EduSpots really is led, although I know that there's some tensions in me being the CEO at this point, which I always reflect on in terms of whether that's a positive thing for the network or not. But EduSpots, in so many senses, is led by 400 incredible local catalysts who, you can see all their stories on our social feeds and similar. But yeah, they really are the center of the change. And I think that positioning of who's leading is the key to local ownership and leadership.
Thank you for mentioning your social media, because I wanted to urge all the listeners to go and follow EduSpots, because you guys are sharing all the nice, inspiring things that the communities are to do and are planning on doing. Highly recommended content there if you want to get ideas on what to bring to your schools and your classrooms. Maybe, adjust to fit your own context, but very, very highly recommended source of inspiration there. And to our listeners, thank you very much for listening to another episode of Ed Transformed. You can follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook. And if you have a project you want to bring to our attention, or a conversation you want us to have, please write to us. And we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.